You know, sometimes I think about the things that I do and think about some of the things that I've done so far and some of the things that I've just spent endless hours trying to perfect and trying to make happen. And it just shows the fact that it shows the fact of not only nonstop growth, but it also shows the fact of just a willingness to get to a point to where just a point of growth. I'm not saying get to a point of, you know, making it. It's just a point of growth. Welcome to the Narrative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, GT. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a comment, like, subscribe, whichever. I would appreciate it. So I've done a lot of things in life, trying to make money, trying to just get to that next level. And I've always been that kind of person since I was a kid. I was always one that wanted to work and wanted to keep money in my pocket. That was just who I was. I was never a person. I was never a person that didn't want to work, and I believe I got that from my mother and my father. They were always working. My father, little bit different. He was kind of here and there, whatever. He had good jobs, but my mother said that his working, going to work, and every day, whatever, and not taking days off was a little shabby. But he was definitely a hard worker, and so was my mother. And I always wanted to do something to make money. I was always cutting grass. I would get up on Saturdays and walk Western Michigan University campus and look in the garbage and get bottles just so I would have enough money to buy a bag of chips or buy a pop or something like that. 'Cause I never really was one to ask my mother continuously for money because I knew that number one, that she was working, she was taking care of us, she was trying to put food on the table and everything. And I just really never had that whole, you know, mom, it's your job to continuously fund me with money type thing. Of course, yes, I did ask my mother for money, but it was a little bit different for me in my age. It was a whole totally different era. It was back then when you asked your parents for money, it was like it was dead serious. Mom, can I borrow $10? So the word borrow was like taken literally. Here, you can borrow this, but I need my money back on the day that you claim you're going to pay it back, or you need to come back to me and let me know why you're not giving me my money back. There was no just borrow it and disappear and it hopefully they don't say anything about it because, money was too hard to come by for you to just borrow money and not pay it back, even though that was your mother or father. It was just a different type of, it was a different type of dynamic. Definitely a lot different than today's society. But my point is, I always wanted to make money. That was it. That was never a thing of me not working. And I started once I got older because I grew up before the internet. So it was much more, it was a totally different era. So fast forward later in life, after the internet and everything, and you have different opportunities to create different streams of income. Now you're trying and trying and trying. You're trying different things, and some work, some don't. But the point is to keep trying. It's not the fact of whether they work or whether they not. You just have to understand understand the trends and what you're doing and what you're putting out and, what direction you want to go and different things of that nature. And at the end of the day, I guess for me, it matters that I keep going because something will work out eventually. But it's not going to work out if you stop. So if you get anything from my listening to my podcast, because I forget how many episodes. There's quite a few. I'm definitely building a catalog, but the whole point of one of the points of my podcast is that I want people to see that an ordinary person just kept trying. Even when, the podcast, it was just something else out there that there really wasn't, it's not making any money, but it is, as I said in earlier episodes, there's an emotional payback for it because I get to vent. I get to get my thoughts out in the air. I get to tell people what I'm thinking. Some people will agree with it. Some people won't. Some people will have different opinions, but that's why we're human. You're allowed to have your own opinion, and you're allowed to say, well, maybe you should think about it this way, or maybe you should think about it that way, or I feel different about it. And that's definitely conversations that I want to have with my listeners because I want to hear other people's point of view and I want to understand it from their point of view. But the whole point of this episode is keep going and don't give up no matter what. Thanks for tuning in to the Narrative Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Gerald Tabb. You can call me GT or G. If you like this episode, leave a comment, share, subscribe, and help this podcast grow. Have a good one.